Let's talk about Unit 4. So we talked about Unit 1, pacing and planning already. And now we're going to do 4. And so the reason why I'm doing these 2 units, and we're not doing all the units here in the APSI, but the reason why I chose these 2 units is because some teachers like to start with 1 and some teachers like to start with Unit 4. Why Unit 4 first? Well, there's a few reasons that may or may not make sense to you. I sort of start with some of the stuff in Unit 4 is actually in my Chapter 2 in the textbook, and then the rest of it comes later. But Unit 4 covers plate tectonics, soil, atmosphere, and climate. And so the reasoning is that here's a few reasons why some teachers start with Unit 4. The weather issues. So going outside and doing soil or getting soil samples when the weather turns cold or gets frozen in late October or November when you would get to Unit 4 is challenging. So they're running into weather issues. Another thing is that some of your students have a stronger background in earth science. My students do not at this point. They don't have a strong background in earth science. They have more of a background in biology. So starting with Unit 1 and ecology makes more sense for my students because I want them to have success with some things that they know already. But if your students have a strong background in earth science, it might make sense to start with Unit 4 and give them some success and build complexity on stuff they already know. Another thing is that sometimes biomes are better understood when you understood climate. However, I don't teach climate before biomes, and my students always understand biomes just fine in the complexity that they need for the AP test, which is not very complex, really, for biomes. So there are some reasons why teachers start with 4. So this is why I'm going to go through 4. I don't have a recommendation for you. I think it depends on your weather. I think it depends on what background your students have. So honestly, Unit 4 has some harder concepts in it. Soil is hard for students if they're not farmers or come from an agriculture background. Soil can be very foreign to students. Plate tectonics is surprisingly hard for kids to understand some of the density things with plate tectonics. Your students may or may not be strong with it. Mine are not very strong going into this, so I have to do quite a bit of review or new material on plate tectonics. My students, it's now being built into NGSS chemistry before they get to me, but they really haven't had it yet because we sort of just launched that course last year. And then the atmosphere stuff is rather complex. The things like the Coriolis effect and wind patterns it hurts their brains a little bit. So Unit 4 things can be harder for your students. They are for mine, but if your students, again, have a stronger earth science background, it might be easier for them, Unit 4, and you might have some weather constraints. And in that case, it might be a good idea to start with Unit 4. Okay, so enough on that. So here is the spreadsheet for Unit 4. I have all of the resources you need. If there's a link to a website, I have them here. Otherwise, these items are in the Unit 4 folder. And then let's look at some sample placing. So here we have, again, the traditional, a flipped pacing example and remote learning pacing example. Plate tectonic doodle notes is currently being revised. So I actually didn't own it. It was something I bought off of Teachers Pay Teachers a while ago, a couple of years ago, and I purchased some images to make my own. So because I want it to be more specific to what exactly they have to learn in AP Environmental Science. So when those are made this summer, I'll populate them in the Google Drive for you. You don't have to buy them from anywhere. I'm going to put them in there for you. Okay, and then so if you're teaching remotely on video, you would do the plate tectonic doodle notes with your students and they'd follow along on video, which is what I do for my online class that I already do. Okay, If you're doing traditional, you don't have a ton of time for soil's physical properties, so you might have to do just a brief demonstration in the front of the room. If you're flipped, you will have more time to do physical properties of soil lab with soil sieves and soil sampling and porosity and permeability, and so I'll have those lab resources for you in the drive. If you're remote learning, there is a virtual lab on plate tectonics. You can fill in here and then do some soil stuff a little bit later on. So I am also creating some soil doodle notes, so those will be in the drive for you soon. If you're virtual learning or remote learning, you can do those on video. If you're traditional learning, I'm not sure if you'll have time, or you could replace the notes for 4.2, 4.3. You could replace them with the doodle notes. Topic questions. So remember, these are formative assessment questions that are found in AP Classroom. They're not the personal progress checks. They're separate questions. So you can use them again as bell ringers or openers. For me, they're easy to, because I flip, I give reading quizzes and make sure that the kids are watching my lecture videos and reading at home. And so I could put these topic questions in my reading quizzes. So some of the questions will be formative and some will be summative in those reading questions. Chemistry of soil lab, you can do with eco columns or separately with soil samples. Either way is acceptable. I do this lab with soil probes, but the rapid test soil testing kits are cheaper initially than soil probes, but over time, you know, purchasing the probes ends up being more cost effective. For remote lab, you can do a couple of things. There's an earthworm case study that goes over a lot of soil topics. You could do the lab on video, kind of do a demo of chemistry of soil and a demo of the physical properties. You could film yourself doing them, because soil labs are ones that often are kind of must-do labs. Very often on the AP test, almost every year, they're asking questions about the properties of soil. So it is one that's pretty essential. Atmospheric science drawing notes, I am revising these currently. They're in your drive along with a key, but I'm tweaking them a little bit. I'm adding some inversion layers to these notes. Okay, there's some soil reading. So if you can't have a chance for the kids, there used to be actually a soil virtual lab that I had my online kids do, but that website is now a pay website. It's from Discovery Channel, and so I don't do that one anymore. So instead, I'm most likely either going to film myself or do the case study and soil reading so they can get more soil stuff, more soil science. All right, and then I put in a math review day here. So every other week or so, I put in math days. For traditional, you don't have as much time in class, so I put it as homework. And then we go to the Coriolis lab. My students have 2 days, Coriolis lab here and the follow-up questions. So that's what flipped allows you. In the traditional, you would need to do the lab 1 day and the lab questions at home. A couple other things here. Here's a virtual lab on wetlands, and then here's another one. So in the Google Drive, let me go back to our spreadsheet actually. Down here for wetlands, I'm sorry, watersheds. I meant to say watersheds. There's actually 2 virtual watershed labs. One is easier than the other. There's like level 1 and level 2. So you could do those virtual labs in remote learning. And yeah, here it is, watersheds. I said wetland. It's supposed to be watershed. So let me fix that. And this is watershed. Okay. So some of the new things I found that I don't have, but I'm considering purchasing them. I think it's like $5 each, and then you get file, the PDF, and then you can print it out for your kids. But my students have a little bit of trouble understanding watersheds, so there's an origami watershed that looks pretty interesting to me. So it's from a company called Organelles. And so, it's drainage basins, which is a watershed. And so I thought this might be a good way for kids to build a visual. With remote learning, you could have it printed them, and if they pick up packets at the school for remote learning, I'm not sure how it's all going to work. If I end up doing remote learning, I hope that they can come and pick up some packets from me, because I can't require them to print at home. So I hope that's the case. And then there's another origami one that looks really interesting for me too. Desert formation. So this is the rain shadow effect, which looks kind of fun to build. And I would Xerox this in black and white and make them color it to get the idea across. Okay, where am I? Here we are. So I have a couple of origami things that look kind of fun to get the concept in, and you could do them for remote learning as well. If you had time with traditional, you could do origami as well, if you had time. And then we get into El Nino. So I have drawing notes for you in the file with a key, and we do them together. I actually also have video link for that, so that you can see. I actually have the video made for El Nino drawing notes. I will get that link and attach it, because I don't think I put the link in the file, but I put the key in the file. And then for homework, I have online coaching on my mastering platform. You could, depending on what book you adopt, I know a lot of them have online portals. You could assign some of those things as review. And then here's another virtual lab for El Nino. It's supposed to take about 20 minutes. The link is here, ESRI Virtual Labs. You have the link here for this virtual lab. Okay. These ESRI labs, they are a new resource that I've discovered, which are going to be really good for remote learning. But when we go to them, this is the teacher version. I don't see a student version of the worksheet, so it's something that I will have to make, or you'll have to make. Somebody will have to make the student version. If I make it, I'll be very happy to share it with you. And then I have atmospheric practice problems in the Google Drive as well that I made with a key, because in this unit, most of the questions are diagram questions, and in the personal progress check 4, there's going to be a lot of the same diagrams that I put into these practice problems. Then there's a seasons card sort that I do. I actually don't own this one. I bought it on Teacher Pay Teacher from some vendor, but I like it. So I put the link for it. I don't own the rights, so I couldn't put it in the drive for you. It's a $3 download. I like it. I don't know this person, but it's kind of fun as a review the day before the test. I also assign Bozeman Science Ed Puzzles, and I do a review game if there's time. For remote learning, probably some vocab game or Kahoot, virtual Kahoot, or something like that would be really fun. You could also assign the Bozeman Ed Puzzles in remote learning as well. All right, and then the exam. So that is an overview of Unit 4. So you can do Unit 4 first. You can do it in order. But when you get to Unit 4, here's some sample pacing and some ideas for you.